Is 20 Minutes of Impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. In this episode of the two-part series on electrification of manufacturing, my guest is Addison Stark, co-founder and CEO of industrial electric heat pump manufacturer AtmosZero. Addison's going to describe the opportunities and the challenges to industrial scale electric heat pump deployment, highlighted by the just released report, Powering American Industry, the Economic Opportunity of Industrial Electrification, produced for the Renewable Thermal Collaborative and the Industrial Heat Pump Alliance by Greenline Insights. Early in Addison's career, he was with the Department of Energy's the Department of Energy's Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, or ARPA-E, and Associate Director for Energy Innovation with the Bipartisan Policy Center. Later, he was Chief Technology Officer with UrbanX Renewables Group and an adjunct professor for Science, Technology, and International Affairs with Georgetown University. And he was an advisor to venture capital groups after that, until he co-founded and became CEO for AtmosZero in April 2022. So Addison, we're here to talk about industrial electrification. Describe the core product that AtmosZero manufactures and how it figures in to this new report, Powering American Industry, the Economic Opportunity of Industrial Electrification.
Herman, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to jumping in on this important topic. At AtmosZero, what we do is build Boiler 2.0. It's a modular electric steam generator for industry because steam remains one of the foundational utilities of modern manufacturing. What's unique is that we've developed a way to electrify steam generation while requiring far less electrical infrastructure than traditional electric resistance approaches and far less capital than competing heat pump approaches. The result is that manufacturers can modernize their thermal systems while making more productive use of both energy and capital. The bigger story isn't the boiler, what we're doing itself, but actually the story of how this industrial sector can drive industrial productivity.
Let me clarify one thing, Addison. The fundamental element here that we're talking about is that you're using electricity to boil water to create the steam that drives all kinds of industrial processes, as opposed to using fossil fuel-based resources like natural gas or oil or coal to boil water to create the steam. Is that correct?
That's right, Herman. At AtmosZero, we've developed a heat pump technology, but more technically for call it the science staffers listening, it's a vapor compression cycle enabled platform that can provide industrial steam while significantly lessening electrical infrastructure. So, for example, to be able to generate 2 units of steam, we only require 1 unit of electricity. That's distinct from resistive approaches that require 1 unit of electricity for every 1 unit of steam out. And so
what do you mean by resistive? What do you mean by resistive approaches? That's what you are not, right? So
yeah, that's correct. So the biggest electrified solution for industrial steam today is so-called resistance boilers. It's like an electric tea kettle, but really large and really hot. So you put 1 kilowatt hour of electricity in, that resistive element, like a home hot water heater, heats up water and then generates steam out of it, an equivalent energy amount. However, one of the things I want to highlight is also what we're not as a combustion technology. However, there's a little bit of nuance there because, I don't think that the future is gas versus electricity in industrial productivity. It's actually productivity itself. When I look at the long-term horizon, the winners will be the manufacturers that generate the most output from every megawatt hour and every molecule of fuel, every grid connection, and every dollar of capital they invest. Our view is that electrified steam has an important role to play in that future because it can help manufacturers modernize thermal infrastructure while making more productive use of energy and capital. Because we see natural gas as a phenomenal resource. The
Sure.
question isn't whether natural gas is good or bad. It's whether America gets the highest value from every molecule of gas that we use versus every kilowatt hour of electricity we generate. If a manufacturer, for example, when we look at the market, has abundant low cost gas and existing combustion boilers and no operational reason to change, continuing to use natural gas may be entirely rational. We don't
Yeah.
believe electrification is the answer to every steam system, but the more interesting question is whether electrification creates superior economics, superior productivity, or superior strategic value. And America's challenge isn't choosing gas or electricity, it's maximizing economic output from every energy resource and every dollar of industrial capital. So sometimes that will mean natural gas, sometimes it'll mean electricity, but the opportunity is deploying each resource where it creates the most value.
I like that framing a lot. It's really not about the fuel so much as who can boil water better, if I can say it that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
it,
uh, uh,
exactly
but
right.
and let me ask you this: what kinds of industrial products would want this kind of technology? I want to get to the economics. You mentioned economics, and I want to get to that subject in a second. But just real quick across the top, what
Mhm.
kind of products would your technology be used for?
Yeah, steam is the most ubiquitous heat transfer mechanism in industry. It's what drove the Industrial Revolution, and it's still
Sure.
50% of all heat delivered to industry. So when we look at the boiler itself, it drives food and beverage production. So thinking about sterilization or cooking or anything there, chemical separations, pulp and paper, building heating, particularly in older buildings with steam systems, all of these things are applications for steam that we're not going to just get rid of.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about the economics because the paper reported literally billions of dollars in economic benefits that can come from electrifying manufacturing. So I just want to talk about heating technologies, and we touched on that already a little bit. What heating technologies would your industrial electric heat pumps displace? What would you be I know you're not saying you're going to throw out fossil fuel based heating or anything, but you are going to be able to boil water better than some technologies. And I'm particularly interested in taking that one step further. Can you replace technologies that require very high temperatures? Um, and so tell us a little bit about the economics and what you can displace and how much of the heating or boiling water technologies you can replace.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's worth stepping back here is looking at one of the bigger picture things, right? The economics are so dependent on the relative costs of electricity, of fossil fuels, of other combustion fuels, so biomass or anything else at a specific site. And
Mhm.
so, one of the biggest macro trends driving right now in and against industrial electrification is the fact that the US continues to invest heavily in AI infrastructure. And that's driving macro trends in electricity prices that we need to be aware of and think about in context of industrial electrification. But AI, advanced manufacturing, and industrial production all compete for the same infrastructure dollars and the same energy. So the more we can think about productive industrial systems, the more effectively America can deploy energy towards the strategic industries that will drive the next generation of economic leadership. Ultimately, what I see is that the United States doesn't need to choose between powering AI, strengthening manufacturing, and expanding energy production. The path to leadership and energy dominance is doing all things at once. And so that brings us to the core economic opportunity of industrial electrification itself. And that's the core of the report that the RTC and the IHPA put out. And I think it really shows both, it's not just a story of manufacturing competitiveness for end users, where electrification can allow for modernization of CapEx. That's a really important thing in industrial production to be able to remain internationally competitive, whether your customers are international importers who are behind some sort of a emissions mechanism like European CBAM that's going to be important for U.S. manufacturers that export to Europe, but also being able to directly utilize behind the meter generation assets that can bring down OPEX and production costs to be able to remain internationally competitive. So we know from that report that this is a multi-hundreds of billions of dollar investment opportunity with substantial economic output. But what excites me the most isn't simply the energy transition aspect, it's that opportunity to modernize American industry, improve productivity, and strengthen manufacturing competitiveness. The last part of your question is, where do we play the best? Heat pumps have a role at what I like to say is um, low and medium temperature. So it could be quite hot for us as people. We're talking about well above boiling temperatures, but in Celsius, we're talking about the best place for heat pumps is up to about 200 C or about 450 Fahrenheit. Anything above that, that's where technologies like resistive storage approaches. You might have heard companies like Rondo or Antora. They're more right sized for larger and higher temperature applications. But in the steam regime, where the majority of steam is delivered at these lower temperatures, and particularly in light and medium industry like food and beverage and others, that's where having a solution that can cost effectively and high efficiency utilize electricity drives the OPEX savings for customers that allow for adoption and fuel flexibility.
One quick note for our listeners, we had Rondo on the podcast. I think it was last year. I'd have to go back and look it up, but you can find it in our list on our website. Um, just out of curiosity, and this isn't really part of the subject we're here to talk about today, but how do you reach those higher temperatures? Is that where something like hydrogen might come in?
I don't think that hydrogen's going to play a serious role. That's just me with my hot take for you. But I
Good.
do think electric resistive approaches like Rondo and Antora and other technologies can continue to drive up towards combustion temperatures are going to play a role there, but the ability to go to higher and higher temperatures is diminishing returns in terms of total market opportunity. When we're talking about really being able to go in and helping manufacturers to reindustrialize where they are today, it starts with that 50% of heat, that steam temperature, and steam is really not delivered above 200 C.
So, bottom line, I think you said earlier, I want to get this straight because I'm about to ask you something relevant to it, is that you can be twice as economically efficient as resistive technologies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, and you're using electricity. Um, there are going to be costs for using more electricity uh, in industry. So this may not apply to your technology, and I want you to specify this. But where you are adding electricity to industry, you're creating more demand for electricity. You mentioned AI earlier. You would be competing with AI for that electricity. Um, do you see problems in overall industrial electrification adding to all the other kinds of needs we have for electricity? Do you does so Let me ask this question in pieces. Number one, do your electric heat pumps create some kind of demand for electricity if they get more widespread? Sure, you're saving 50%, but if you're using four times as many facilities, now you're using a lot of electricity. I don't know how you figure it exactly. I want you to explain that. I may not be saying that right, Addison. I apologize if I'm not. But also, what about the need for uh, the things that deliver electricity, transmission, transformers? Have you thought about all this growth in electricity and what it means for the economics of our society?
The short answer is yes on all of those questions. The long answer is what I'll give you right now, which
Okay.
is we have taken a very specific focus on the reality that, manufacturers don't wake up every morning trying to decarbonize. They wake up thinking about how to remain competitive. And
Right.
so we've taken a customer-focused view on how do we design an electrified solution for steam generation that takes in future growth challenges as a reality. Um, to proactively electrify all of industrial heat, to be able to anticipate the growth of AI and the electricity demand there, and then to also look at other strategic industries that we want to be able to build and grow in the US, does mean that our anticipated electrical generation is a very steep curve, and it should be. That is something that we as a society should be investing in to be able to drive increased productivity just through supply of more electrons. However, the other side of that is if we are driving towards electrification across all facets of industry, we need to focus on productivity per megawatt hour. And that's where high efficiency solutions like heat pumps really come into effect. Exactly to your point earlier, Herman, the way we look at this is that our solution for every 1 unit of electricity in can generate 2 units of steam. And that allows for not only the most efficient expansion of electricity utilization, but places where electric utilization is already deployed for heat, we can go in and open more capacity in the grid, both at the distribution level and at the transmission level. There's a lot of things we've done to focus on how do we make this a drop-in solution that does not require massive transformer upgrades, massive changes in on-site electrical systems, keeping it medium voltage, thinking about things that are deployable, not just on that OpEx question, the amount of electricity that's utilized, but also on this CapEx question too. We only have so many dollars that we spend every year on industrial infrastructure. And so many of them today are going towards AI, which is chasing a big strategic opportunity. But when we also think about beneficial electrification and the other strategic build out of reindustrialization, we have to be mindful of CapEx efficiency there as well. And that's another thing that's really important here is how do we maximize our economic output per megawatt hour and per dollar of CapEx spent? And that's how we think about it at AtmosZero.
There's a lot of talk about speed to power these days, and this is a bit of a tangent, but um, how does your technology compare with the resistive technologies that you've described, or other kinds of use of technologies that boil water, in terms of building and getting online?
Mhm. That's a great question, Herman, and actually something that we think a lot about. We focus on a fully productized, packaged heat pump solution that's factory built here in northern Colorado. I'm sitting in Loveland, Colorado right now in our factory, and we focus on being able to build a fully US supply chain enabled productized unit that can be shipped and deployed in a day. The difference of what we do at these smaller levels, and we build at the 1 megawatt building block, which is right sized for the small manufacturers around the country. The reality is 65% of manufacturing facilities in the US have a thermal load below 10 megawatts, and that's very different. That means you can't really do project finance, you can't do a complicated development project. You need things that are scalable and repeatable. And so we focus on making it exactly like traditional combustion boilers always have been, a packaged product that is well known to integrate. And so that's distinct. We focus on the differentiation between us and resistive storage approaches is a lot of these resistive storage approaches are really right sized for very large infrastructure, very large refineries, ethanol manufacturers, other things where project finance underwrites it. You're able to do a lot of bespoke project engineering and you can return the capital on that. But for the small manufacturers, you're not as sophisticated. You need a drop in replacement for existing combustion boilers and things that can be deployed off the shelf. And so that's why we focus on a completely factory spec approach to be able to speed to electrification, speed to drop, and speed to steam. Maybe has a nice ring to it compared to speed to power.
I like that idea because we're talking about onshoring a lot of new manufacturing possibilities, bringing them back to the United States. And you're going to be able to, whoever wants to do that, you're going to be able to put those people in business in a really uh, time efficient manner, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I do think about this in the broader, call it energy and industrial dominance frame, and it's used in a lot of different ways, but I think it's the most resonant way we can think about policy, we can think about ambition in the next 3 years. But I don't see it as just about producing more energy. It's really about the reality that the countries that lead in the 21st century economy won't be the ones that just generate the most energy. They'll be the ones that create the most value from it. And this onshoring of industry, being able to focus on driving up the utilization of our natural resources, both renewable and fossil in the US, being able to drive economic productivity and lead, that is all part of the transition. And doing that in a clean and responsible, sustainable way is one of those things that we see as being just as important beyond just exporting resources.
What do you see as the significant challenges to your technology? And particularly, what do you see as the policy and regulatory solutions to meeting those challenges?
You know, when I look at it in what has changed between administrations is the language changes, but I see and continue to hear in the real market strong interest in manufacturing competitiveness, energy security, economic growth, and industrial productivity supporting all those objectives. When I look at what could be the biggest enablers from the Trump administration, from DC in general, for manufacturers out here in America, is that the biggest enablers of reliable infrastructure, competitive electricity prices, workforce development, domestic manufacturing capacity, and continued investment in industrial innovation. I think that too many energy transition companies over-indexed on subsidies for too long. I don't think that those things really make a robust industry. Many of us never thought that, and so we focused accordingly. I really see that the goal should be helping American manufacturers compete and grow. Industrial electrification and DOE industrial competitiveness discussions need to highlight workforce development, manufacturing readiness, supply chain capacity, and infrastructure as key enabling conditions to drive a overall reindustrialization and strategic industry growth, and ultimately be the investments we do to fully capitalize on and expand beyond just an energy dominance agenda to an industrial dominance agenda.
Were any of the tax credits that either the ones that still exist or the ones that were under the Biden administration and don't exist anymore, did any of those apply to what you do? I mean, I know there are manufacturing tax credits. I'm trying to kind of run through the list of them in my mind. I'm not thinking of anything specific. Tell us about that.
So, Herman, you mentioned at the top of this that I, at one point, was a federal employee. So I learned not to depend on the feds to be able to support a business. Um, that said, I was working in the one place that I think is super important is innovation support has had bipartisan support for multiple administrations. It is a place where we've been able to build out the US to be a true leader in energy technology development. But I don't think that continued subsidy support is the way to play and grow. We built this company assuming $0 of federal support on commercial projects and have never signed up for a project that needed to be underwritten with a grant. I think that's served us well, but I think it'll also serve us well for the long haul because it's made us make the hard decisions about technology and product that serve the commercial customer um, without having to sign up for a forever subsidy. And I think that's what needs to drive the broader industrial build out of the US. And it doesn't mean that we don't have market opportunity. We see tremendous opportunity both here in the US, but ultimately as we mature in the opportunity to be a US manufacturer who exports electrified steam boilers globally because not every country is as blessed with low cost natural gas as we are here. And being able to help to solve that challenge in the market, both through LNG export and electrified equipment export, allows the US to be in a very strong strategic position.
Okay, well, I think our listeners can draw one definite conclusion from this conversation, Addison. If you can create a technology that uses half as much electricity as your competitors, you may be able to get by pretty well in the market. And I'm going to leave it there if that's okay with you. I want to thank you. My guest has been AtmosZero co-founder and CEO Addison Stark for describing the role of industrial heat pumps in the transition described by the just released report, Powering American Industry, the Economic Opportunity of Industrial Electrification. I also want to thank my producer, Melissa Brown. And as always, I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and follow with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.